Welcome to Car Space. I'm joined by Matt. If you remember Matt from way back in season one, you remember like midway through season one, we had this guy named Matt who would come on occasionally, and then he decided to become a nurse and went to school. So Matt, welcome back.
Wow. That was shady. It's really that vote of support and friendship that I valued through all these years. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thanks. How's your podcast going?
Well, it's going. It is. We recorded as much as we could before I couldn't work anymore for the semester. I think around mid-October, from mid-October to December 8th was complete insanity, but I did very, very well. So the podcast is rolling forward. I finished my first semester of nursing school with 3 A's and 2 B's.
Nice.
And
so what happened in those classes with the B's though?
I only had 5, you jerk. I would like to say that I am not necessarily the best test taker, and my finals there were 3 cumulative finals, an 80 on one, and 100 on the second one, and a 98 on the third one.
Nice.
And so I did very, very well. Yeah.
Good. So what happened in the class with the 98 and the other one with the 80? I'm like the Asian father over here. Like,
so one of my friends, he's Japanese, and when I told him my grades, he goes, "Wow, that's really good." He goes, an 80, huh? Nice. So basically an F. Yeah. Like, I was like, "Sir, I worked really hard." He goes, "Yeah, nice. Mm-hmm.
Not hard enough, obviously."
Yeah.
100 or bust.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to Photoshop that when the guy's like cleaning his car. I think it's in Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah, Russia or Ukraine. And he's like cleaning his car, and then he looks up, he sees like pebbles and stuff all, and he runs. A slab of the roof just like comes down on his car. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but obviously, that's some Final Destination level mess. This is probably going to end up being like a combination of several, because like lots of wild things have happened. So the craziest one that comes to my mind, to set the scene, think 2 lanes each way with a center turn lane, not a median, but like a full center lane.
Yeah.
And houses along each side. So we have 5 lanes. And a nurse was driving home from work after her night shift. If you don't know, nurses, night shifts are typically 7 to 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So she's driving home for this very long shift. She hears something behind her. There's nothing there. She's driving, hearing, and then she hears something again. And when she looks, there's a guy in her trunk trying to carve his way from the trunk to her back seat. And he's doing really well at getting through.
Oh my goodness.
So she, understandably, the terms we use are reasonable, and what would a reasonable and prudent person do? Lost her fucking shit, because that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And she swerved and crossed. So she left her lane, crossed a center lane, crossed oncoming, and hit a car in a driveway. I believe it was a house of a husband and wife who were both home. She hit the first car so hard it totaled the car she hit, and slammed that car into the car in front of it, which was the husband and wife's cars, totaling them both, and then jumped out of the car hysterical, which of course then everything comes through. And the other insurance company was like, she overreacted.
No.
So I was like, okay. So I was injury. I handled fatalities at one point, dismemberment, the worst of the worst claims. If you can imagine it, I saw it. If it went to court, I could see it. If it was in court, it was me. And this is one of those cases that could potentially get that far. Like that can go straight to court. It's called acting in bad faith. It's when the insurance company does something super naughty, and the either party feels like, if the other party, like the one that has the other insurance company, is like, well, I don't like their decision. That's one type of thing. But if they make a decision and their own insurance company is like, oh no, you're fine, even though it's like egregious, that's called acting in bad faith. They didn't protect their own person, or at least follow the law. Sometimes you have to do things your insured doesn't like. And that's just the way it is, because sometimes you are at fault for an accident. Your insurance company pays for it. They pay for it to protect you from being sued. That's like
Right.
our whole shtick. But in that case, the conversation essentially went, you do not want this to go to court. We will all be in court for years and you're going to pay a lot of money and this is going to drag this out. I don't know what the final results of it were. It either got transferred to another rep. I can't remember if it was my claim or if I was just helping for that, because when somebody's out on vacation for a week or two, the rest of the reps on their team will pick up the claim. So we tend to, like if they end in, the claim ends in 02, that's mine for the week while the person is out. We divide up the claims so that everybody can watch what comes in.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was my claim or not, but I remember talking about it to the other insurance company and being like, y'all, this is ugly. Like, this is really bad. We're lucky nobody was killed. And, obviously there's injuries, but nobody lost any limbs. This could be terrible. I mean, the property damage was all over the place. The other insurance company, it's called subrogation, when they pay for their damages and want you to pay it back. So they paid for their insurance cards and wanted us to pay for theirs. And we're like, well, this is a really weird situation. Like, yes, she did hit them, but why did she hit them? She hit them because some guy was trying to carve his way through her seat and do God knows what. So that was wild.
So, oh,
right.
I'm imagining the girl from The Ring coming up the well.
Yeah.
But as a guy coming through the back seat. So,
yeah.
Do you know what happened to the guy?
I think he was injured, but I don't know. They usually get arrested.
Well, I'm hoping he got arrested because,
I was never able to speak to him because he was in jail. Sometimes you can't speak to them in jail, but it's really a pain. Another claim, you'll have DUIs where sometimes people are very nonchalant about it and you won't know somebody died. So you're supposed to let somebody know, like if somebody is killed in an accident, you're involved, even if it's not your fault, you should let the adjuster know, hey, this person passed away at the scene, so we can get it immediately to the right adjuster. Because somebody who's just taking the claim is fine. They'll finish recording the claim and get it assigned to the right person. But if they just think, oh, this is just, somebody totaled their car, it's fine. And it turns out, no, more things than that were totaled. Okay. Then it just drags it out for everybody. I had a particularly dramatic claim. So, where I live, the state is a huge state. And in the accident, there was so much that went wrong. I think it's the only claim. This is the only claim that I ever cried about. In 5 years of being an adjuster, it's the only time I ever got up, left my desk, went to the bathroom, and cried for about 10 minutes because I was just done. I was already tired because I typically worked 10 or 12-hour days to keep up. But our insured was in a smart car, and the other person was in a GMC, I think Envoy, like that kind of.
Like the Trailblazer.
Yeah, basically. Oh no, it wasn't Envoy. And they were only going about 30, but they hit the guy in the driver's side because he ran the light. And the car only had a couple $1,000s worth of damage, but when you get hit right in the door, and the gentleman was elderly. So of course the neck injuries and everything. And had he been like you or me, we probably would have been fine. Sore, probably in the hospital for a few days, but okay. But ultimately he passed from his injuries. It was terrible. So the other person, I think, had like an injury to her arm because the airbags went off and hit her. You tend to get a lot of hand and wrist injuries from an airbag blowing. So you already have this. So the smart car is actually not totaled. I think it was a smart car, something similar to that, like that, very small. It was actually not totaled. It held up mostly fine, but we in that situation totaled the car because family obviously didn't want it back. And, no. So, okay, fine. What also gets involved when you have that is personal injury gets involved. Like people can pay to have their own personal injury on their claim. So that's called first party. That rep was involved. So it's just, I'm in charge of the claim. So I have him handling the personal injury and I'm working with the family. And so I called the agency to say, hey, let you know that one of our members has passed. And it turned out they knew the person, his spouse, and their like 6 or 7 kids. Like the family had grown up in the area, so they knew their whole family. And like each person, there was only 2 or 3 people in the office. Both of them were like, all of them were sobbing because they just knew the family really well. They were close family friends. And they were yelling into my phone that they begged the guy not to buy the car because it was just so small and he was,
Right.
very elderly. So, that. And this is over the span of 2 or I think it was like day 3 where I lost my shit finally. I finally got a hold of the other person driving, and the guy was a patient of hers at the facility she worked at. And I had spoken to the missus earlier that week. So now we have the other person that struck him that wasn't at fault, because we were at fault. I accepted liability immediately. And the other driver realized she knew the guy that had pulled out in front of her was now deceased because he had passed away that morning right before I called her. And I'd spoken, this was on, I think, a Wednesday. When I'd spoken to the missus, she was obviously under a lot of stress, but at the time he had woken up and he appeared to be doing better before he declined and didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
And she had an accident at home and also passed away that same week, like literally Wednesday, like when I got wind of it. And then I noticed none of the first party stuff wasn't done. And I'm getting phone call. My phone is now erupting from other people calling. And I'm like, what is going on? The first party rep's mother had suddenly passed away, like middle of the workday, just out of nowhere. Jeez. And they had so many phone calls that come in, blowing up my phone and every phone that people could reach, that finally that person's manager went in and put a note in the file about that had happened, which is how I found out. I'm like, y'all maybe should have sent me an email so I could have just said there's personal issues going on and you're going to just have to wait. So by the time I'm done, I'm now dealing with the executor of the state, who is one of their grown children. And I have now had about 4 hours of people crying on my phone. I mean, just unrelenting crying. And I still have 249 other claims. And I was a serious injury rep. Like I handled all my claims look similar to, I have a handful that have been transferred to me that shouldn't have been, but you have a policy where you can't transfer them back. So I have, 50 of them or so that might be like minor crap that should never have been transferred to me, but can't give them back. And but at least 150 to 200 do look similar to this, just not this involved. And I put my headset down, and my teammate who was next to me, she was like, I think you should just go for a walk, because they could hear, like, all of this was coming through my phone loud enough that my peers could all hear this. And we've all had these days. It's happened to all of us. And I went to the bathroom and I just cried for a solid 10 minutes because I was just so overwhelmed by so much death and sadness. And because, I mean, also, I still take care of this person. The other person's car is seriously damaged. She has an arm injury. She can't work. She works in a medical facility. She knows this family. The agency knows the family. Every person that I need to talk to or that could work with me on this, I didn't have an independent person to deal with. And that was incredibly traumatic. Like that was a really hard day. I came home from that day, and I went and laid down and didn't talk for many hours. But that was a wild story.
So you said that you had like that is crazy. I mean, that is a lot of people dying, first of all.
Yeah, that's a little unusual. That one is a more unusual extreme.
Well, like you said, you had like 250 ongoing cases. Yeah, right.
Our claim load is about 200.
Like, how would you possibly keep track of? Like, how does the company, and I like, we're not obviously going to name who you worked for, but like, how does a company expect one person to deal with that sheer amount of cases? Like, there's not enough time in a day.
It used to be about 100 to 150, 100, 120.
Still, and even that to me is
that's actually not so bad because you don't get them all at once.
Okay.
They come rolling in. So they kind of get on a rolling calendar. So I only set myself 7 tasks per day, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you have to make a liability, you have to investigate an accident, take everybody's statements, get find out who's injured, what the injuries are, deal with, if there's attorneys, deal with them. You'll have stuff that rolls in throughout the day while you're working those 7 tasks. Plus, you're so expected to take inbound calls too.
Right.
I would just take myself off so I could like focus on the idea. Most people did was they would take a call, handle the call, put themselves on unavailable, handle 1 or 2 things, take another call, kind of like, because sometimes all you want to do is just sit, you're like, fine, I'll just take calls because I just need to focus on I need somebody telling me what to do for a minute,
Right.
It not well. I think the company has since reduced their caseload because when it became 250 plus, I remember at one point a rep had quit and I was handed like 50 of their files in one day. And I was unhappy. When I left, one of my teammates came with me on another Friday. Their team of 6, 3 of them walked out in one afternoon. There were people just retiring. We had the ambulance there every Friday. It was pretty bad. It was a pretty unhealthy work environment, which is ultimately why I quietly interviewed. I gave a 6-week notice because I understand the impact. But I wasn't trying to burn bridges because ultimately the only people feeling the impact are my teammates. So when I turned in that notice officially, what they did was to stop signing me a new claims. And then I tried to work my claims down as much as possible. Because you'll have stuff that can be closed. You just physically can't get to it. You just can't deal with it. Like you don't have time to get yelled at one more time because you're trying to do everything as a phone system. Everything is getting through it. The estimator is usually pretty on. And because an initial estimate is just a walk around estimate. Right. It's just what they can see. They're not going to take your car apart in your driveway or at the shop. When the shop takes it apart, that's when the estimator is looking for signs of obvious total. I mean, there are times when you look at, you're like, oh, that's totaled, Right. But then when the shop starts working on it, they'll say, hey, okay, there's this much damage. On average, whatever the estimate is, you can expect, it's called a supplemental estimate. The supplement is going to be 15 to 20% more. And so whatever your estimate it is, if you add about 20% to that, unless you're seeing signs of like obvious totals, more than likely you can kind of get it into a range. And most of the time, if it's within a range to be safe, to be total, we'll just go ahead and total it because it's better for the customer. You don't want to be within $100. You're like, well, like that is a headlight, that is a housing right there. That's less than a bumper cover. Bumper covers are $300 to $500, So not even counting labor. So you would have those situations. And then of course you have your fraudulent situations. Another dramatic case I had was I called a guy to take a statement about a DUI and he goes, which one? And I went, what? Yeah. So that's always, that's always a great start. And you're like, usually, so one thing I always do before I call people is I look at claims history. Mm-hmm. Well, there wasn't anything else other than this particular car on this, because insurance follows your car. So if I'm driving your car, well, here in the States, if I borrow your car, go to the store and I hit somebody or get hit by somebody, if I hit somebody and I'm at fault, your insurance pays for it because insurance follows you. Now, if I do like $300,000 worth of damage, your insurance would pay primary, and then mine as an insured driver would be secondary. But primarily, insurance follows vehicles. And that's also something that people get really dramatic about. In this particular case, the guy driving was not the owner of the vehicle. He was a household member, but he was the boyfriend of the driver, the primary driver, who was a adult child on her father's insurance. So like 24, 25, they were at that edge of the range where, she was going to be out of school and, but he lived in their house and occasionally used her car. And so it was the father that had answered, the father of the girlfriend. And he was just, it was not good. He was, yeah, let me get him. Like, this is very like, and so the first one, apparently it had a minor DUI. And I was like, nope, that's not the one I'm calling about. The one I was calling about was this person was driving up a highway in a state where there are, you know how some highways have, you can actually have pedestrian crossings at them because they're kind of like
Yeah.
highways and frontage roads. This
Yep.
was one of those highways. Well, the person that he struck was a pedestrian who didn't cross at well, this is like 11 o'clock at night. This is way,
Yeah.
way after dark. She was inebriated. The pedestrian was inebriated and walked into the street and basically into the side of his car,
Okay.
but he was going 55. In those cases, what happens is the the department will do a reconstruction of the scene. They'll reconstruct to the best of their ability how the entire accident happened. And sometimes you get a really great officer who is willing to speak with you and faxes you over because when you have these cases, wrongful death suits immediately get filed for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
And yeah, and it's one of those cases where, yeah, he was technically drinking, but he wasn't drunk. He was under the limit. He
Right.
wasn't at 0.0, but he wasn't over the legal limit, which I think is like 0.08 or something like
Yeah.
that.
Point
0.04
oh 0.08,
or
I think
something.
is what it is. Yeah.
0.08. Um, something like that. But he wasn't at that limit, and it wasn't a factor either because he never could have seen the other person. I mean, they didn't hit his headlight. They walked into like the side of the car as he was coming up. So they kind of glanced off the side of the car. And those accident descriptions will haunt you forever. I can still remember reading it. Because when you do things like this, you see things like gray matter, brain matter, body parts, and you have to remember that nobody's immune from a car accident. This one was a grown person who, I don't want to say fortunately was an adult, but those claims are a lot harder to deal with when it's children. I mean, those claims will just ruin your life. Like
Yeah.
you will not be okay. You literally will have to take the next day off work. And that's the part of having 200 to 250 claims that's the problem because you need time to investigate this. You
Yeah.
also need time to deal with whoever you're going to call because you might be the first person they speak to.
So, do insurance companies negotiate with repair shops on prices?
To a point. So how that works is if you've ever had a car accident, the insurance company will say, "Hey, we have these network shops we use."
Hmm.
So the reason for that is those shops have already been screened and vetted and have a contract with the insurance company. So they agree upon set rates. What it also means, the reason I even now go to the recommended shop for my insurance company is because if you have a problem with the shop or the work is guaranteed. If you go to
Okay.
one that's not in network, you don't like the prices, you don't like so we'll try to talk to them, we'll try to negotiate with them to see if something's like, if it's pretty close per hour, $5-6 an hour off, whatever. I ain't gonna argue with that. But when it's like way off or they're charging crazy stuff and you don't like the work, we just tell you up front, like, hey, you can go anywhere. These are the shops we recommend because the work is guaranteed.
Right.
If you go in there and the customer service is just awful, we can do something about that. Like there is penalties they
Right.
pay for that. Like we can help you. But if you go somewhere else, that's on you. We can't do anything about it. I
Yeah.
cannot tell you how many times I've been screamed at. I don't mean got sternly spoken to, screamed at, like over people being like, oh, well, this and that. And so we will
Yeah.
try if it's not a network shop, but
Only so much. Yeah.
there is only so much they can do. And also the network shops, they typically are directly connected. They can be directly connected to your insurance company. So when they submit their estimates, it's electronic. I'll submit it, and within 10 seconds, I have it, and I can open it up and approve it right then. It was honestly though outside. I mean, yes, you have your crazy cases, but it was so fun. Like I love cars, so it was a great. I liked it more when it was just property because there are situations that make you not want to be in cars anymore because it can be really tragic, it can be
Yeah.
really hard. So you have to learn to cope. You don't know what's coming in on the next phone line. Like you just don't know. But then I decided it was ultimately working in medical there that pushed me to go back to in-person medical and decide to try to be a nurse because I would see everything they do. I'm like, I want to help people from the other side. And I got tired of being on this side of it where I was just yelled at all day. I'm like, well, at least I'm going to yell at everybody. At least I'll know how to do cool stuff.
Thanks for coming on, Matt, and talking to us about insurance. And we'll see
And
you
nursing.
see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. See you next time.